Okay, Chair Coburn, we are now live. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Brittany. Welcome, everybody. I'll call the meeting of the Climate Action Committee to order. First on the agenda is approval of the agenda or any additions to the agenda. So I just need a mover to put that on the floor. Bob, thank you. And all in favor? Thank you. Any discussions about the agenda, or are there any additions to the agenda at this time? Deputy Mayor Carlton?
Thank you. I would just like to add some comments from Good Roads Conference that I attended this past week, and I have 4 different comments that came out of that I think would apply to us here. So if we can just add that later.
Thank you. Sounds great. Anything else? No? Okay, then we can go ahead and vote to approve the agenda as not as presented, but as amended with Sue's comments regarding the Good Roads coming later. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Just a reminder about declaring any pecuniary interest now or along the way at any point in time in the meeting. Item number 4, motion or recommendation rather to approve the minutes of the last Climate Action Committee meeting held on February 5th, 2021. Mover to put that on the floor, please. Thank you, Danuta. All in favor? And that carries. Any comments or concerns regarding the minutes as posted? No? Okay, seeing none, we can then vote to approve those minutes. All in favor? Thank you, that carries. And that takes us to item number 5, a presentation by our Director of Operations, Stephen Dahlmeyer, who's going to bring us up to speed on all there is to know about our township biodigester facility. So the floor is yours, Stephen, and thanks for being here.
Thank you guys for having me today. I'd like to do a quick, hopefully 10-minute PowerPoint presentation on the biodigester, and then we'll have some comments and questions afterwards the presentation, just so I can stay within the minutes. Just going to share my screen here. Everybody see that okay? Okay. So Georgian Bluffs has a biodigester, so we're going to dip into a quick overview of the biodigester. The Township of Georgian Bluffs and the Township of Chatsworth owns and operates a dairy biodigester facility. It is comprised of 4 components to it. So we have hauled sewage going to it, a dewatering process, and digestive system, and as well as a lagoon system on the property there. The site receives sewage and organic waste such as vegetable waste, fats, oils, and greases, processes waste for supplements, possible food waste, and also food waste from base boarding. So we have a lot of material coming from all over the places to our biodigester. Right here is actually from the entrance of the property looking down, just so everybody has an idea what the site looks like. So you got the building there where our engine room is with all our components, and then also your biodigester along with some storage tanks. So right here is our biodigester with a lot of where the biogas is formed into, also some pumps and some holding stations within there as well. And then we look over here, actually in the green container there, that is actually that's all the engine part right there. So the whole thing is actually the engine that drives the whole biodigester. The generator is off to the one side there in the red that's been kind of cut off from the photo. And then also this is where a lot of the people come in to pour the material into the biodigester right here. So it just kind of gives you an idea of where they are. Then once everything is processed and all that, and the gas is created and all the digestates coming through, is actually stored in 2 separate storage tanks that are to the west of the property, then into the farther west of that is actually our lagoons that we are also operating out of this location. So what is a biodigester? A biodigester is like a mechanical stomach. So it's kind of like a human stomach, but it's more of a mechanical process. It is fed with organic material, which is broken down by microorganisms in an oxygen-free environment to produce renewable energy called biogas and other material that is mainly used as fertilizer. So once the gas is created, the other material has been used as fertilizer for agricultural processes. What materials can the biodigester process? Any organic material can be used to feed a biodigester, but some materials work better than others because they're easier for the bacteria to digestate. So there's a lot of materials like your green bin collection, if we ever go that route or whatever. That's something, food scraps, your leaves, your organic components that way are pretty good to digest in these kind of systems. What is the production capacity of this biodigester? So the current biodigester is designed to do roughly about 3,000 cubic meters per day of biogas. And then also it's in a 1 week equivalent, we're supposed to be able to produce roughly about 42,000 kilowatts of electricity. A typical day that we do here at Georgian Bluffs when we're running the biodigester is roughly about 600 cubic meters per day, which is approximately 1,200 kilowatts of electricity per day. So you can see we're currently at 20% of what the actual capacity of the plant is, and that's something that we also have some studies going on to kind of to do more research on what we can do to improve it. How is biogas used? So the renewable biogas is used to run the generator to produce the backup power to the grid. So that's how we back feed into the grid. Also, the carbon dioxide produced is formed from a renewable resource and is considered climate change neutral as the amount of CO2 entering the atmosphere isn't increasing. So we're offsetting a little bit here and there, but it's also being more of a climate change neutral component. How long does it take for the material to process? Right now, in our holding tanks, our digestate spends roughly about 30 to 45 days in our tanks. So it kind of gives you an idea of how long the organic material is just still sitting there, and then it gets removed and then taken off to our locations, farmers, agricultural properties, just to be shared across the board. So this is the biggest complaint we do receive here and there. Do biodigesters stink? However, biodigesters can produce hydrogen sulfate, which smells like rotten eggs. This biodigester has several filters that reduces the smell from the gas. So we've got quite a few filters that we try to change out just so we can reduce the amount of smell complaints we do get, but it's something that we are trying to keep a little bit more of a maintenance cost on. Also, unless the other thing too is when we open up the filling tank to add more manure or biodigestible material for repairs, there is a little bit of odor that kind of comes out when we open up that tank to add or do some repairs. So there is a little bit of that rotten smell there, but that's something once it's closed, you can't really smell it. So what are the benefits of having a biodigester? Biodigester produces biogas, which is a renewable resource that can be used as a substitute or replacement for natural gas. Biogas can be used to reduce costs or to generate revenue streams by powering an electrical generator to provide electricity back into the electric grid, using the remaining product as organic fertilizer on agricultural lands, and also cleaning gas and injecting it into a natural gas grid. If we had access to allow access into a natural gas system, we could backfeed into that system as well, just like the power. So there are those potentials there as well. Another thing here is also with the biodigester is our biodigester is affordable or economical for producers. So there are different factors that determine if a biodigester operation is affordable or economical. So the amount of displaced methane from landfills, the price of biomethane for the natural gas system, feeding electricity back into the power grid, and then also helping reduce the organic waste in landfills. So just so everybody is aware, the Ontario government is currently in the process to limit organic waste going into landfills. So that's something that's going to be coming out in the next 3 to 5 years here, which then is going to be a huge impact to landfills and waste management and diversion. So this is where a biodigester would be a key component to it. So that's the end of the little PowerPoint I had for you guys. So just so everybody is aware, there are currently 2 studies being done by the Georgian Bluffs and Chatsworth. They are both feasibility studies. So one is the co-digestion and biogas feasibility study, and the other one is called the asset assessment study. So we're looking at different options of what we can do with this system. The first study is allowing us to look into more partnerships, more material coming up, using the facility to its full capacity. And the other one's looking at what is the value of the assessments and where we're moving after that with Chatsworth and all that. So I am ready to take any questions if the committee has questions.
Okay, so we'll open the floor up to questions for Mr. Dahlmeyer. And sorry, Danuta, go ahead.
I was under the impression, oh, hello, thank you, Brian, for the your talk. Sorry, Stephen. I was under the impression that organic waste could not be processed by the biodigester without some kind of considerable upgrading for that. So this is the first I've heard that it is taking organic waste. And so I was wondering if that would then make it possible for waste diversion to occur in Georgian Bluffs or in certainly higher settlement areas to divert the organic waste by a green bin program. And it would go to the biodigester.
Through you, Chair Coburn, to Danita there. Right now, we're currently taking clean organic fill coming into the plant. We do not have the processing capability quite yet to get to take the raw materials coming in from restaurants or the actual green bin collection. It does go to another place to be sorted and kind of cleaned up a bit more, then brought back up to us to use into the biodigester. So there is a process there that we are currently not doing at the location here, but once we get into that process, we would be able to handle what we're trying to do.
Luke, you're up next, please.
Yeah, thanks, Stephen. Very useful. This is a question, and maybe it's also something that John could but I was interested to hear you say that, and again, I show my ignorance here, that it is a climate change neutral operation. And I wondered how that, you also mentioned, of course, that you prevent a lot of methane escaping to landfills. And we know that methane is more detrimental to climate change than carbon dioxide. So I wonder to what extent you could actually make the point that by preventing methane from escaping from landfills, this actually has a positive climate change neutral impact. Is that, and I'm just saying it because if we go to a climate action plan from a municipal perspective, this would actually be, I mean, I'm just wondering to what extent this actually could be a real positive activity for the municipality as a whole.
Thanks. That's a great question, Luke. That's one of the ones I had on my list as well. So looking forward to Steve's response to that. Go ahead, Steve.
So in regards to that question, thank you very much for asking it. It's something that's going to be addressed in the feasibility study through the co-digestion process. They're looking at, the consultant is actually looking at all processes and what this biodigester can do for us. It's something I would wait to see what goes to the board group first before I can actually provide a proper answer the way that would be beneficial to us.
Sorry, that's my phone ringing. Thank you. That's helpful, Steve. Yeah, and just a follow-up question, I think, to that last one. As I said, I had the same question. Can we call it climate change neutral, particularly when we're only operating at 20% capacity with the source separated organics? And I've been doing a little bit of reading around greenwashing, and that's a term that I hadn't heard until just recently, and I'm sure John will have a better explanation of this than will I. But that's the tendency to businesses and organizations to claim that their business or their product is carbon neutral or that it's environmentally friendly without the data to back that up. So I think we should be really careful not to say that we're climate neutral if we're not yet. And I wonder if we're not there yet, if we're only using SSOs, processing that at 20%. Does that make sense? Does anyone else have a comment in regards to that? Okay, any other questions? Anne, we'll move on to you.
You were talking about when you're running at a certain capacity, which is lower than what it could be. So does that mean that there are a bunch of days that you're actually not operating because you don't have the material? And possibly my next question actually could fit with that. I understand from what you said that the process takes about 30 to 45 days to complete. Does that mean that you load it up? It takes 30 to 45 days to complete, and then you have to empty it and reload it, or are you on a kind of a continual load process?
All right, so we'll start with the first question there. It's because we're running at 600, like the 20% capacity, is because we don't have enough clean fill or SO coming up to us. So that's something that we're trying to work through, and that's also being addressed in the first feasibility study to find more suppliers to provide us with more material to bring us up to capacity. The second portion of your question there, in regards to, being within 30 days or 45 days, we load it up constantly. When we do get material, we're always adding to it. It's the byproduct that's actually just sitting in the tanks for the 30 to 40 days. That's like your almost like a raw soil, almost, or a raw nutrient that could be, once it gets cleaned out, then it goes to the farm lands or the agricultural lands, and that's where it is actually being stored for the 30 days before it actually leaves the tank. So it's basically, once the bacteria eats all the nutrients out to create the gas, all the byproduct from that kind of gets stored off-site onto those tanks. Then that gets cleaned out every 30 to 45 days, weather pending as well.
Thank you, Steve. And I've just got one follow-up question then, and that is, I understand that in the Grey County Climate Action Plan that I think is coming out soon, they do speak to more production of biogas in the county. And do you see that as possibly an opportunity for the biodigester to actually reach capacity? Is that a way of getting?
Yeah, so in regards to that question as well, that's something that's being addressed in our first feasibility study there, the co-digestion. So we are looking at partnerships with all our lower tier and the upper tier municipalities, also along with all the businesses around the area as well, that we could use to increase our capacity of being able to produce more biogas. So that's something that's going to be addressed in that first study that should be coming back hopefully in April, hopefully.
Thank you. Bob.
There, I'm unmuted. Very good. Yeah, I actually couldn't get your PowerPoint up on my little laptop or iPad here for some reason, so I'm probably asking something that you already presented in there, but some of the raw material that's coming into the biodigester would be human sewage from sewage companies that are picking it up from septic tanks. And
yes. So,
is there any, like, what's the reason why all the septic tanks are not, the material from the septic tanks that are being pumped are not going to the biodigester? Like, that would give you lots of material if they did. So why is that not happening?
So a lot of the sewage material is going to the lagoons that are at the facility, and that's where that stuff is being processed too. Some of the material that is coming is going elsewhere to other places where haulers are taking it. So it's something that is going to be addressed with our feasibility study as well, just so that we can keep, try and get that material back to us.
Okay. Well, haulers have to pay more though, don't they?
Yeah, that's what I was hoping Steve would address. I think it has to do with the cost associated with it. Is that not correct, Steve?
That is involved with a tipping fee as well. So that's something that we're currently also investigating through these feasibility studies, right? So that's a lot of the stuff that we are trying to figure out what the biodigester is going to be addressed in the feasibility studies that have been issued to consultants to deal with.
Thank you. I think Deputy Mayor Carlton, I believe you're next.
You can call me Sue. I don't need that whole title. I'll speak to part of that, why a lot of the septage is not going there. The two townships needed to look at and did and decided not to go ahead with this. But what we needed to do was enact sort of a bylaw that stated that all septage picked up within the municipalities needed to go directly to the biodigester. Chatsworth especially was hesitant to kind of put that in place and enforce that. The other fact was that the haulers aren't just hauling from Virgin Bluffs and Chatsworth. So to tell them that they could only pick up on that route from one of our townships to go to the digester, and then the next day go pick up everything from South Bruce or wherever else they were hauling from. Normally they were going to have mixed loads, so it was hard to enforce that. The other expectation had been that the provincial government was going to put in legislation that would prohibit any of that being spread on farm fields, which would have forced the issue of it having to go to the biodigester. So there's about 3 different factors that play into why it's not enforced that it go there. So just what I know about it for now.
Yeah, that's really helpful, Sue. And just to add to that, I'm not going to hang my hat on any provincial government enforcing, because that's what happened the last time around. We established the facility in the expectation that the Ontario Ministry was going to, as Sue said, prohibit the spreading of raw manure on fields, and then things change, governments change, and that doesn't happen. So my concern is that that could happen again. I think this is a facility that does have the potential to work and to be helpful for the environment. But it's also one that has to be in partnership with people who are willing to feed the SSOs into that into the biodigester. So it's tricky. Anne, I think you were next.
I should have unmuted, but I'll do it quickly. Just from a personal experience, we had to have our septic system cleaned out last summer, and we asked why was it going to the biodigester, and the answer was no, because it would cost too much money.
Yeah. Any response to that, Steve, or is that?
That's, once again, that's kind of something that's going through the feasibility study to look at the tipping fees in that. So it's something that we need to kind of wait for those feasibility studies to come back before we can actually give out the answers that everybody is looking for.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good reminder. Al, did you have something to add to that topic?
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just wanted to respond to that. My understanding is when the business case was developed, the biodigester, and this is, I know this is climate action, but unfortunately we got to talk about the business behind the biodigester and the business case. My understanding is when the business case was developed, there was going to be 2 revenue streams. One was the actual power generated and sold up to the grid, which would generate X amount of dollars. And then the vast majority of the revenue was based on the business case that was developed, was based on those tipping fees. So those septic haulers and everyone else. And that's something that, as Steve has mentioned, we're looking at in terms of the business case moving forward is, do we adjust those tipping fees that make it a little more economical for those who want to dump their septic waste at the biodigester? So those are the types of things we're going to be looking at as we move down this path in later on this year.
Thank you, Al. I think John posted a question in the chat forum regarding when we hope to hear back from this study. And I think, Steve, earlier you had said maybe April. Is that correct?
We're looking, hopefully we'll have some kind of draft in April and hopefully present the final report to the bio group shortly after that. So that's where we're at, but I'll be following up with the consultants later on next week as well to go over those processes.
Great, thank you. Danuta, take it away.
I heard from somebody that who was from Chatsworth that there had been reported problems with using fertilizer on the fields because they were getting a lot of weeds and so on through that. So the other question I had was, is there a good market for the fertilizer? And have you had any feedback about the quality of it? Is it clean? Is it?
So right now we haven't heard any feedback on it from talking with staff about it. So that's something that's also going to hopefully be addressed shortly coming out of these feasibility studies of what we could possibly do and how we could market the byproduct as well.
Thank you. And Bob.
Yeah, thank you. I was just wondering if we know if the human septage that goes in there that gets treated when it gets spread on the fields, is it safe at that point? Like, has there been enough heat involved in the process to clean it up so that it is, environmentally friendly?
Yeah, once it goes into the system and it gets heated up, it gets cleaned up, and it's safe to be used after that. So it is a safe product once it's done.
Okay, and the stuff that's going on the fields without that treatment is not a safe product then, basically.
That is correct.
Okay.
Steve, does that get tested at all by any agricultural inspection, but before it gets spread on the fields, is there a series of tests that has to pass first?
Yeah, every month we do an actual test on the sample as well through our process that we have to do. So I do bring reports to the bio group to show them what's the sampling and the levels of information that does require to be tested. So it is getting tested once a month as well.
Thank you. And Sue, I think you're next.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that we had to have our septic pumped last year. To have it taken out to the biodigester, which I asked Bob to do, it was $300 to have it pumped and taken out. I didn't feel that was unreasonable for something that happens once every 3 to 5 years. If we were in town paying sewage, water or rates or whatever, it'd be a lot more than that. So I thought it was reasonable.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you. Anne.
I'm just curious that the consultation that's going on right now, is it doing any comparative study of kind of the environmental impact of the raw sewage going on the fields to crops and wildlife versus the product that could be going on the field that's been through the biodigester? Is there a comparison happening?
Yes. So the study also is looking at the environmental impacts, but that's something I could reach out with them as well to see if we can add that into our first feasibility study as well, just to make sure that they are gathering all that data as well.
Thank you. That would be a good comparator. Any other questions for Steve at this point? I'm not seeing anything. Steve, thank you so much for your time. That was a great presentation. I feel like I've read a lot about the biodigester, but there's always more to learn. And I know you're really busy these days, so thanks for taking the time to not only make the presentation, but come in and answer our questions as well.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Okay. So if there's no other discussion regarding the biodigester facility, and I'm seeing none, I don't believe we have any delegations or correspondence to address. And so the next agenda item is 8.1, a staff report. Is this Al? Is this your something that you're going to speak to?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just by way of an introduction to the report, I'm not going to spend everyone's time and go through it verbatim. This was as promised. We had worked on a little bit of an introduction. That's going to be, the intent is that this would be presented to council to give them an opportunity to learn a little bit more about the work that the committee's done to date and where we're planning on bringing it. You can see through the recommendations that it's an information report only. Part of what we're talking about is recommending that council endorse the participation or sort of the membership of Georgian Bluffs becoming a member of partners for climate change, and the Building Adaptive and Resilient Community BARC group as well. There's a budget implication for that membership. What we're suggesting is that as part of our 2021 budget, if council endorses what will be requested in that 2021 budget for our climate action processes and what we're moving forward with, that the $20,000 membership fee will be taken from there. And that we're going to direct staff to sort of create a special council meeting where we can talk about climate action, provide an opportunity for us to give a little more of an overview of what we're doing, help council members if they've got any questions in regards to what we're proposing we're going to be doing, and have sort of that Q&A session from there. The report then sort of gives a little bit of a background in terms of the importance of climate action, talks about a few bullet points in terms of some of the things that the committee's already worked on, and then goes on to sort of do a little bit more of an analysis in some of the things that we're seeing for over the next few years, and really paint a picture of what that roadmap will look like for Georgian Bluffs. And then we take it from there. You'll see sort of the various phases and milestones that we're talking about on page 5. That we're proposing in terms of some of the roadmap and the milestones that we're going to sort of get to on the financial impact page, which is, I guess, page 7. Specifically, we talk about the fact that we would like council to start to consider about $150,000 over the next 3 years to kickstart the climate action plan, and really map out our roadmap and start to have some money to actually start some projects and get things moving. What we've identified in the draft budget submission that staff are working on now, that council will be seeing on March 30th, is there's a $50,000 request for 2021. What council will also see in the coming months is a 5-year and a 10-year forecast, and what we're going to be doing there is identifying potentially projects over the next 10 years on our capital budget that will propel our climate action plan forward. So council will be having full transparency and visibility as to what's being planned and what we're going to be doing, based on the recommendations that will be coming back from the consultant that we're going to be hiring to develop our long-term plan. So with that, I don't know if you've got any questions, but I'm happy to answer them. We've also included a couple of appendices in the report, which is really the presentations that were done from Grey County that were shared with us. I will tell you that we've had several meetings from the CAOs and talking about climate action, and it's clearly something that's high on everyone's priority, whether you're lower tier or the upper tier municipality. And I'm very happy to say that there really does appear to be a real willingness and motivation to work together to move these agendas forward at both levels. And that to me is very promising and inspiring. So looking forward to working with all of our CAOs, looking for opportunities for synergies, looking for opportunities for cost sharing, and looking for opportunities for us to jointly put in grant applications to look for additional funding options, so that all of these initiatives and projects do not necessarily have to be funded from our tax base, but rather there's a lot of grant applications there from other levels of government, from utility companies and from private endowments as well. And that's what we're going to be exploring as well as we move forward.
Thank you very much, Al. I appreciate hearing in particular some of the rationale behind wanting to move this particular agenda forward. And I think it would be really helpful for the rest of council to hear exactly what you just said, that this is not just on everybody's radar anymore, that they're moving it towards meaningful action. And it's not just us, that it's happening throughout the lower tiers and with the upper tier as well. So that's encouraging. And I'll just open it up for questions and or comments regarding that plan. Luke.
Well, first, I really liked it. I thought it was a neat little memo. I think the tone was just wonderful. It was very practical, straightforward, easy to understand. So much respect for the team pulling it together. Question is I have with regards to the finances. So you asked for 50,000 for 2021, or which 20,000 will go to the BARC membership, proposed BARC membership. I'm just thinking, or just wondering about, will the remaining funds, I would imagine without any additional funds, you're looking at $30,000. Is that enough for 2021 to get the program started and establish the baseline? Of course, we can do, probably there's a lot that we can do ourselves, but would it be, how do you see that? Because I'm sure you've thought about that.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, to Luke. Absolutely, we're thinking about that. We believe it'll be enough to kickstart the consultant, but we're talking about 50,000 would be the extent of taxpayer funding going in. We are still mining for additional grant opportunities and looking to partner up with other municipalities and the county to see if there's an opportunity for us to share some of those costs. It makes a lot of sense. When I had the meeting with the county, we talked about baselining. They've already started to do some baselining, which includes some work in Georgian Bluffs. So we're going to piggyback on that, and we're hoping that between the two efforts that we have and sort of some of the other efforts that are happening in some of the neighboring municipalities, that we'll be able to cost share a lot of this. I'm hesitant to go out with an RFP just by ourselves. I'm hoping we can go together with others and get some synergies and get some sort of some cost effectiveness by sort of making it a little bit of a larger project, and we'll get some synergies and some cost savings from that. So we're hopeful that the 30 will be sufficient enough to kickstart it, but we're by no means just going to be hoping that we're going to just use 50. We're hoping that we can match that and get more from other sources of funding.
Sure, thanks.
Okay, Danuta, you're next.
Okay, I'd like to echo what Luke said. I was really impressed reading your document. I had a completely different question, so I'm glad Luke asked the financial one. You mentioned right at towards the end of it, the concept of doing an e-survey of council and staff. And so I just wanted to put a hand in there and just sort of saying, how can we help with that, or how would that be developed?
Through you, Madam Chair. I'm going to mention the following. We are constantly on the look, and I forward an article today to our senior management team as well, of certain municipalities and townships that have created this citizen engagement platform that's online, it's virtual. We've got a lot of municipalities that have developed apps as well for smartphone users so that they can sort of contribute to the dialogue that's happening. So we're going to be looking at what all of that looks like. But we're also cognizant of the fact that in our demographics here in Georgian Bluffs, it's our sort of desire to engage with residents can't solely be fixed on sort of the social media aspect and online aspects. We've got to do some direct mail to raise the awareness. We have to do some town halls once the COVID sort of bubble is lifted and we can start getting people back. And part of what we're looking at as well is some mobile signage so that we can put up some signage at some of our busiest intersections to raise awareness of certain things that are happening in the township and sort of try to promote that. So we are going to be looking at what sort of those e-surveys look like. We'll certainly bring it back to this committee before it goes anywhere else to start talking about sort of what those questions will be, what the modem's going to be. I'm used to sort of, it's a multi-channel sort of aspect when you're looking for feedback. I'm used to sort of having direct mail, online surveys, but also opportunities where whether it's a drop box in the library, whether it's a drop box at a community center, or people that are sort of walking in, it's about utilizing trails and everything else, and maybe putting some signage boards at the beginning of our trails. Wherever there's high traffic areas, it's part of what we're challenged with is how are we going to better communicate with our residents to let them know that these are important things and give them an opportunity for that input. So we're exploring all those options as part of our 2021 work plan, but we're going to be doing a lot of that on that front. I'm a firm believer that the more input you have, the better decision you're going to have. And so we're going to provide every opportunity for our residents to understand and be aware of what we're doing, and have them provide an opportunity for them to provide us with some feedback as well and some suggestions.
Sounds good, thank you. Gosh, I think we're going to Anne next.
Anne, you're muted.
All right, start again. So thank you, Kathy, and thank you, Al. I thought it was an excellent report as well, and really hope to be well received by council. I noticed that part of the recommendation is to present this to council in a joint council climate action committee meeting. So kind of a special meeting for that, and to discuss the strategies, directions, ask questions, but also to raise awareness. And I guess I wonder about particularly the last part in terms of what do the council members need and what are they interested in hearing, so that we can actually help prepare for that. And I wondered actually whether the survey that you had referenced was also partly with council members, or whether individual conversations that you're having with council members, or how can you find out what they feel they need to know, what questions they have, what worries they have about this.
Sure. Through you, Madam Chair. Great question. It's something that Brittany and I, as our clerk, will sort of brainstorm on how to approach every council member and try to make sure that we've got some or most of their questions in advance, so that we can better prepare and sort of put that notification out there. So Brittany and I will certainly contact each council member, and we'll determine exactly what that's going to look like. And we'll see exactly if we can have some of those pre-arranged questions in advance, so that we can better prepare ourselves for that. That's a great idea.
And Anne, you had a follow-up question or comment?
Follow-up question. Kind of my experience in working with folks is that real life stories of what other municipalities have done, so they put in who knows what into practice, might be a really useful tool to kind of allay some of the worries or fears that council may have. If they can see this is what Kinloss did, or this is what a rural community and wherever did, and how they put it into place, and how hopefully maybe they save some money on it. If we could find some stories like that, or some real examples like that, that could address some of the questions that council has, I think that would be a really useful way of going about it.
Sure. And sorry, if I just before Brittany answers, through you, Madam Chair, if committee members do have some examples that you'd like to share, please forward them to us as well. I mean, if you've got some huge success stories out there, municipalities that have done some great work, and I would say municipalities around the world, not necessarily Ontario municipalities, please send them forward, and we can certainly put that as part of the awareness campaign and education for sure. Brittany, I think you had an answer.
Thank you. I just wanted to note, I did include this a little bit later in the agenda, but following our last meeting, I did reach out to the municipality of Huron-Kinloss, specifically their Director of Community Services that facilitated creation of their plan. And I reached out to him regarding, how did you know what questions your council had? How did you ease their concerns? How did you make this a priority? What was your experience like, etc.? So I had a really good conversation with him. His name is Mike Fair, and he did say that he would be more than happy and available to come and meet with this committee to try and talk out the best path forward and how we kind of tackle making this a priority at a council level. So I just wanted to bring that up here. I think once we schedule our next meeting, we do that first, so we can kind of get some ideas as to what that presentation to council should include and what it should look like.
Thank you, Brittany. That's fantastic. Thanks for touching base with that municipality as well. So is there general consensus for Brittany to go ahead and follow up with that kind of an invitation, or how are folks feeling? Yeah. Seems like that's a go, Brittany. Thank you very much for doing that. Any other questions, Anne?
Yeah. So my question is timeline in terms of, I know that council is in the middle of going into budget negotiations for 2023. And is that going to happen before we have this joint meeting with council members? Is that step one, and then we have the meeting, or how is this sequenced?
Yeah, that's a good question. Al or Brittany, can you help us with that?
I can certainly take a stab at this, and then the clerk will correct me when I make my errors. But the way I'm envisioning this is that sometime between now and March 30th, which is when council is scheduled to commence the deliberations for 2021, that with the clerk's assistance, we will schedule something, whether it's a special council meeting or if it's part of an already scheduled meeting, and we'll carve out some time for this. But I will leave that up to the clerk. She's skilled in scheduling all of these things, but I certainly see this prior to the March 30th council meeting on the budget.
So thank you. That makes total sense. And I see Brittany nodding as well. So we would want to queue up this individual from Huron-Kinloss for our next meeting, if possible, then, Brittany. Does that make sense? I know March 30th sounds like a long way away, but it's a month. So yeah, that makes sense then. Any other comments regarding timelines? And I know, John, you had a question as well. You go ahead.
Thanks, Kathy. Hi, everybody. Yeah, and echoing what Luke and Danuta and others have said, it's really thrilling to see Georgian Bluff staff taking such a comprehensive lead on this, and it's exciting to me to think that our township might be the first one to actually commit to climate action in Grey County. My question is, Al, it's always been my perception that once a municipality commits to climate action, that it opens up sources of funding. And in particular, you cannot get funds from Infrastructure Canada if you haven't planned through a climate lens. They're very strict about that. And I believe that it's also true with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And I've been looking at their Green Municipal Fund and case studies that they've got posted there. And there appear to be an incredible array of projects that are fundable and some pretty significant sources of money. So if my assumption is true that once we commit to joining the FCM programs, and that would really open up sources of funding that otherwise aren't available to that we would want to maybe perhaps build that into what we're presenting and proposing to council.
Through you, Madam Chair, you're absolutely right, John. It's part of what we're looking at. But I'm going to temper expectations by saying the following. Sometimes you got to be careful what you wish for. If we were to be successful in getting great sums of money to move forward, I'm cognizant of the fact that we also need staff then to manage those projects and do a whole bunch of things. So this is why I'm trying to do this in a proper sequence that, get council to sort of buy into the vision that we're going to be climate action leaders. Then let's get the resources in place. Let's put that roadmap together. But I don't want to sort of I want to take this one step at a time instead of moving quickly and then falling flat on our faces. So that's why I'd like to take a measured approach on this and take sort of 2021 to sort of get going on this, and then really have the floodgates open once we have that roadmap, once we've got resources in place, once we've confirmed that these are all priority, once we've started to look at the various funding sources and we start getting successful in what we think we can do. Let's just make sure that we then got everything lined up. But I agree with you. I think there is a multitude of funding sources over and above just what our taxpayers will be asked to do here, and that return on that investment will be staggering.
Okay, thanks. That's a very good answer. I really agree with that approach. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thank you.
Chair Coburn, you are muted.
I am so sorry, and thank you for Brittany and Sue for pointing that out to me, not so subtly. Are there any other questions or comments regarding the plan before we move on to the next item. I think it sounds like a reasonable and, as Al says, a measured approach that will get us the long-term results that we're looking for. And, you know, when I hear Georgian Bluffs being a leader in climate change, that really makes me feel proud and it makes me feel good. And I think it's consistent with wanting to preserve our agricultural land and also our natural assets. And instead of giving away flannel pajama bottoms, maybe we give away sapling trees to anybody who wishes to move to our fine municipality. So, Brittany, I see that your hand is up. You go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Coburn. I'm having a giggle at that. I just wanted to, and I apologize if I'm getting ahead of you, but for the recommendation that's included in that report, we just have to have a mover and a seconder and a vote, please.
Oh, yes. Thank you. I forgot all about the business part of the item. Sorry, go ahead, Al. Absolutely.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair, if I may. I think it's important as well as we start talking about this, you know, council members have heard me say this, you know, part of what I've been sort of toying with is a branding strategy for Georgian Bluffs and what does that look like? And I see very much the climate sort of initiative sort of marrying nicely with a brand that we want to develop, what we want to be known for. I mean, you've got the beautiful geographical and natural aspects of Georgian Bluffs, then it just seems to me a natural extension to start talking about preserving what we have, taking a sort of a front runner position on the climate file. So to me, it's part of what we're going to be working on in terms of establishing that brand that we as residents will be proud to call Georgian Bluffs home, and people will know that when they hear about Georgian Bluffs, they'll say, oh yes, you know, they are leaders in this. Oh yes, it's a great place for us to go and visit and sort of enjoy the natural environment. So to me, I see that as a natural extension of what we need to do as a township.
Absolutely, totally agree. For sure. And I know recently Grey Sauble Conservation Authority went through a rebranding process, and the results of that, I see Deputy Mayor Carlton nodding her head because she has more experience in that than I do, but certainly from what I've seen, it was really, really well done. And you see their icon and immediately you think of their message, and it brings to mind a philosophy. And it just fits together so well. And as much as people don't like sometimes us spending money on things like that, in the end, I think there are lots of gains to be made from doing that carefully and thoughtfully. Okay, so Brittany has reminded me that I am supposed to be a good facilitator here. So I will go back to the recommendation. I guess I'll just read it. That the Committee of Council accept this report entitled Climate Action Plan for Georgian Bluffs as an introduction for information purposes only, that Committee of Council committed to a sustainable future and environmental leadership endorse the Township of Georgian Bluffs becoming members of Partners for Climate Change at no cost, effective immediately, and Partners of Building Adaptive and Resilient Communities at $20,000 following the 2021 budget approval. And finally, that staff be directed to schedule a special council meeting to facilitate a session between council and the Climate Action Committee to discuss strategies, direction, ask questions, and help raise awareness. Is there someone who will move this recommendation? And Anne, thank you. All in favor? And that carries. Did I do that? Did I do that right, Brittany?
You did, thank you. And I see that our CAO has his hand raised.
Oh,
Yeah. I just wanted, now that I'm reading that, I'm cognizant of the fact when I look at the recommendation that says following budget approval, I'm wondering, Brittany, I'm relying on you for your expertise. Should it say subject to budget approval? I just don't want councillors to perhaps look at that and assume that we're, you know, pressuring them to approve it, or that we're sort of saying that it's a done deal. Maybe just to make sure we're okay, it's subject to council approval, if that's okay with the committee members.
Absolutely. So sorry, procedurally, if we could just have someone move that amendment.
Okay, and Bob will make that motion to amend as stated by Al, that instead of saying following 2021 budget approval, rather we will say subject to 2021 budget approval. So do we need to have a moving of that motion and another vote, Brittany, or are we good to go?
We just need a vote in favor or in opposition to the amendment. So
Okay.
call all those in favor of the proposed amendment.
And
thank you.
And that carries. I think it's unanimously, so perfect. Thank you for that, Brittany. And then moving on, do we have any questions from the public for today's meeting?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to unfinished business, and I wonder if it's okay if we start with Sue's request to provide comments after her attendance at the Good Roads Association conference. Okay, Sue?
Thank you. That actually makes sense. I was thinking some of my comments may fit into that plan as we go forward with it. First off, I listened to David Miller once they figured out how to live stream the whole subject instead of just parts. And one of the things that really caught my attention with what he was saying, and I didn't catch the municipality that did this, but they reached a point where they needed new sources of energy and were looking at building a brand new energy plant. And instead of doing that, they gave the residents, they paid them to insulate their homes, thereby decreasing the amount of energy required. And it just struck me as that's the type of thinking I think we want to do, to be kind of proactive and maybe not spend more money in places if we can find a slightly different way to do it that has a longer term impact. The other question that arose for me, and I thought of this before, it has to do with the landfill that we shut down a couple of years ago. What is the potential of capturing the methane gas from that landfill? And is it possible? How readily could it be cleaned up and fed back into the grid from there? So that's just a question that maybe is something staff's going to need to research for us. And if it's feasible, do we fit that into our plan as we look forward as just one of our objectives to do? Another one dealt with building codes and electric vehicles, and perhaps putting into the building code that all new builds have a rough-in for electric vehicle charging stations put in. Not necessarily the full thing right through to the end, but a rough-in in the garage or outside or something, so that as we see so many of the manufacturers commit to manufacturing only electric vehicles by 2030, 2035 type thing, I think that's going to be an important thing and would be a selling feature in the homes. And would actually, if we had that already in our building code, then it attracts more people to come to our township to live as well. And finally, along that same line would be making sure we have electric vehicle charging stations at our municipal offices or various locations throughout the township to, again, attract people to coming here, to knowing that if they're at their end of their 300-kilometer route, that there are places here to recharge easily. So that was most of what I got out of it. I haven't finished reading over my 21 pages of notes from that one yet, so I may have more for the next meeting. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. That's what I love about these conferences, is that you get to hear the really innovative ideas that other municipalities have found success in, and then you get to bring it back and share those ideas with the rest of us. So that's very much appreciated. Does anyone have any questions at all for Sue regarding that report? Luke?
Well, I really like the idea. It's more a comment, and I will commit to do a little bit of research myself, but I like the idea about seeing how you can capture the methane gases from the landfill. And the reason why I used to, before COVID, I used to fly a lot, and therefore I did my carbon offset, made my carbon offset contribution. And of course, when you look at where it goes to trees in Panama or in Ecuador or faraway places. Whereas I've also heard, that there were some initiatives in Canada, because I've been wondering, what about our own backyards? And I've heard about some initiatives that companies are now in the business of, I think more or less it's not so much capturing the methane, but really kind of landfill management to make sure that these methane gases don't escape. And that is now a business case actually and it's paid for by people like me who fly and therefore then want to make a contribution. So I really like that idea, Sue, and I wonder to what extent I will do a bit of homework on my part and see if I can find anything, if there is an established business case to actually work in that field. It would be wonderful. It would. I don't know if it would be a moneymaker, but at least it would contribute to the comprehensive nature of the approach we're hoping to take. So thanks for that. I like that idea.
Yeah, I like the idea too, and those are great comments, Luke. I know that the Conservation Authority has a program where they sell trees and plant trees, and folks who want, like yourself, Luke, to offset their carbon footprint will approach the Conservation Authority and say, I want to purchase trees, or I want to have so many trees planted. And so that's it's a win-win. And if we could engage our own municipality in that kind of an approach or strategy, I think that would be useful as well. And I have had questions from others regarding that landfill site, Sue. So I thank you for reminding me of that. It would be nice to know where that pit is at environmentally. Folks have even made suggestions that could be made into some recreational opportunities if ATVers or other off-road vehicles wanted to use, that space of land. But I just personally don't know where we're at in terms of the the contaminant levels and so on. So that would be information that would be nice to have going forward. Any other questions or comments for Sue? Okay, seeing none. The next item under unfinished business is our committee work plan. Now, pardon me, I wasn't sure if this is a standing item on the agenda or if there was a request to have that on there. Brittany?
Thank you. I just wanted to note, and thank you for bringing this up, I do intend to include this on all future agendas, just as simply a standing item to ensure that we're kind of on the right track, make any updates as we see necessary. So if the committee is in favor of doing that, then I will continue to include this as a standing item in all meetings moving forward.
Excellent, thank you. And the committee agrees to that. I'm seeing heads nodding. Were there any updates or comments to the work plan specifically? Sue?
Thank you. I guess the one thing that I had been thinking of was, especially the part about the building code, is that something we could add as part of that plan going forward to make changes to some of our, like the building code or whatever through the municipality to ensure that things like that get caught? So that's maybe more a question for staff on this one.
Mm-hmm. Brittany or Al, Al, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll certainly speak to our chief building official and take a look at that. I do know that in past discussions, we've talked about putting requirements in that every new build would have not only rough-ins for future electric vehicle charging stations, but also future solar panels on roofs and things of that sort, so you can feed into the grid. So I will certainly speak to our chief building official, and we'll explore whether we can or not, or whether that's something that we would have to sort of petition the province in terms of changing that province-wide. But I will certainly get some information on that and bring it back to this committee.
Perfect, thank you. And Anne, did you have a comment?
So I think there's a number of areas that we need to not lose as we're moving forward. I think building codes is one of them, road maintenance is another, erosion prevention is another. So I almost wonder whether we need a parking lot to kind of keep track of kind of items that we think will be important to address as we move forward on the plan development.
You know, that's a good point. I wonder, would that be a separate document? Do you see that as something separate, Brittany, or can that be incorporated in some way into the current committee work plan?
Thank you. I would suggest we simply make it an appendix to our work plan so that we can keep the two documents speaking with one another and update them as we see fit. So using those three things that you just mentioned, I will start the appendix and then we can continue to add to it as we see fit.
Perfect. Thank you. And Luke, you had a question? And then Bob next.
It's more about who will, Brittany, will you own the work plan, or do you want me to give you an update a week in advance or prior to the meeting?
If you're offering, I would love for you to provide it to me a week in advance. I can monitor the appendices as together we can make this kind of collaborative, but yes, I would love and encourage you to keep that updated.
Sure. Okay, will do.
Awesome. Never look a gift horse in the mouth. Bob was next. Sorry, Bob.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we don't lose track of Sue's idea of the charging stations located in various parts of the municipality as well. So that could be placed in the parking lot, I guess, too, please.
Perfect. Thank you. And Al.
So if I may, through you, Madam Chair, in regards to the electric vehicle charging stations, we've already reached out to a third-party provider, and part of what we're going to be looking at in 2021 is for opportunities across the township for us to put electric vehicle charging stations. We realize that oftentimes we are sort of a township where people drive through to get to their final destination. And if we could provide something like that where people can stop at a scenic lookout or at some area where they can pick up a brown bag lunch and charge their vehicle station and sit at a picnic table and enjoy a lunch and a view or something, and maybe even spend some dollars while they're driving through the municipality, then that would be a bonus all around. So we're actually looking at that, and we're trying to see opportunities where we can get third-party providers to actually pick up the cost. They would, of course, charge for those who want to plug in, but it's something that we're exploring right now, and we'll be bringing back something to the committee later on.
That's great, Al. That's exciting to hear, and I love that you tied that in with the lookouts. I think there's a tendency to focus efforts like that in places where there's already decent access. So I am not opposed, of course, to putting one at our municipal building, but it's a stone's throw from the city of Owen Sound, and people have access there. So I'm hoping as we move forward, we look at things through an equity lens as well, to make sure that people who have less access to these kinds of services get it, and we don't just keep throwing everything into the same spots in our municipality. And
yeah, wonderful idea, Al. I really like the idea of having the charging stations at places like the Big Bay Store, the dock, and etc. The other comment for the parking lot, because it sounds like we've already got an item in the parking lot that's starting to be actioned, and maybe the parking lot needs to have some kind of, it's at the thinking stage, it's at the action stage, so that we kind of are able to track them, the same as we've got some timelines and tracking on the work plan.
Excellent. Yeah, I think it's important to track that progress for sure. I think Sue is next. Go ahead, Sue.
Thank you. And thanks, Al, for thinking a little further than I did on where to put those stations, because I was thinking of things like the Keppel Works Department as one of our municipal buildings. It's a little off track, and people probably would prefer to go to the lookouts. A little more attractive place to be.
Al, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I will. I will just sort of, through you, Madam Chair, just temper the expectations, temper them. But part of the discussions we've had to date is, we'd like to move them all around the municipality at some of those areas. When we're talking about a third-party provider picking up the costs, they start looking at the return on that investment. And so that's why they tend to go to more sort of populous areas or certain locations where their business forecasts will generate that return. So when we talk about sort of different areas that might not have the traffic to justify it, they're a little more hesitant. And we're debating, what does that look like then? Is it the municipality helps to subsidize the cost to bring the power lines there and establish that? So that's part of the business case that we're working on now. I think if we're trying to get at the scenic lookouts and different things, I'm not sure whether or not we can get someone to pick up 100% of that cost, but we're going to be looking at all those options, and we'll then bring it back to the committee for your consideration.
Perfect. Sue.
Just add on to that, and you now sit on Grace Harbor Conservation Authority, Kathy. Is that something that they might be interested in doing at some of their properties where people are pulling in, they're maybe going to stay a while they go for a walk and be able to charge, and does it become a bit of a fundraising thing for them as well? So maybe that's another option to get more of those stations within the municipality without us having to do a lot for it.
Right, and using the Conservation Authority as a stakeholder and a partner in those efforts. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Excellent. Anything more to add on the work plan or the appendix of work in progress? Okay, seeing none. The next item then, 10.2, is a verbal update from our township clerk as to correspondence with the University of Guelph and discussions with the municipality of Huron-Kinloss. So Brittany, over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'll be brief because I kind of already outlined my discussions with Huron-Kinloss. Further to those comments, in noting our kind of tight timelines here, the Director of Community Services that I mentioned before is primed to be available within the next few weeks, given that short timeline. So I don't see that being a problem, but I'll keep the committee updated. Secondly, I reached out to the University of Guelph. Thank you to those committee members that were able to provide me with contact information. So I did reach out to all of the contacts we discussed in our last meeting, noting that, we had created this committee. We were taking this on as an initiative within the township. I asked, one, if there would be an interest in working collaboratively, meaning is there an availability for students or PhD research, etc., and also, welcoming any feedback from the professors as to, how we should go about best doing this and best practices, etc. So I did append the correspondence that I received back from one of their doctors regarding just some tips and kind of friendly reminders regarding climate action as we take this on. Right off the bat, there wasn't any necessarily interest in having students involved at this point. I think as we move forward in this process, we can formalize those discussions through grant applications and etc. But at this point, I think we're still a little bit early to be having students involved, but we can tackle that as we continue moving forward. So those are my brief verbal updates. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions on that item for Brittany? Sue.
Thank you. Actually, not a question for Brittany, but for Bob. When it makes reference to MyTax in there, is that the organization that you spoke at Roma a year ago with? Is that the one you were involved with?
Yes, that's correct, Sue. They do have grants available for research projects. So I'd been running a research project for the Ontario Maple Syrup Producers Association, and we're still involved with that, not through MyTax now, but we're just going to MAFRA now for some more, hopefully, funding to continue with that project. But that's the same organization, and that's a good idea, but they usually need some matching dollars. So the Ontario Maple Syrup Producers in that situation came up with $7,500. And MyTax came up with another $7,500. So we had $15,000. And then we hired a graduate student from Columbia not university, but he was a Colombian, and he did a lot of work on the chemistry of maple sap for us, and then Agriculture Canada jumped in and did a whole bunch more. So yeah, partners are great, and my tax is there to kickstart some of this type of research.
Interesting. Thank you.
Yeah.
John, did you have a comment or a question?
I did. Thanks, Brittany, for reaching out to University of Guelph. I think this is a really good approach that we should be pursuing and continue to pursue. And maybe just suggest as a next step in this that we try reaching out to the Ontario Climate Consortium, of which Guelph is simply a member. And this might be a much more interactive group, and we might get more leads by reaching a little bit broader and higher through the Ontario Climate Consortium. When I was first researching my whole climate stuff here, I was in touch with them. They were very helpful. They linked me with a prof at York who helped me a lot with the wind data I was working on. And so we might consider that as maybe a next step in pursuing these kind of collaborative projects with the university community, because they have a lot of resources, and those are human resources that might really help us move forward.
Excellent. So how do we capture that we don't lose sight of it? Is that appropriate for our appendix, or will that just be noted in our minutes, Brittany?
So I think we have a couple of options. I can take direction from the committee to follow up with that committee now, if that's the wish. Alternatively, we can place it in our appendices / parking lot for future. But whatever the committee's direction is, we can move forward appropriately.
Are we John, do you feel that we're at that stage where we should be reaching out? How much lead time does that organization need?
Well, I think I'll go back to what Al said previously in response to my question, that let's not get too ambitious here too quickly, and let's maybe we'll put this in the parking lot for now. A master's student on a project typically will be 2 years. And so given the long-term nature of what we're trying to do here, I would be quite content to put that in the parking lot, but just not lose sight of it.
Perfect. Thank you. That makes sense for sure. Any other questions for Brittany regarding those updates? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much, Brittany, for bringing that information back to us. That's really helpful. North Bruce Peninsula energy audit, and you've requested this item to be brought forward, so I will turn the floor over to you.
Actually, it probably should go to Luke. I forwarded the document to Brittany on his behalf, but he's been in communication with Rod from South Bruce Peninsula. So if we could pass it to Luke.
Sure, thanks, Anne. So, yeah, what this is I mentioned before, this is a spreadsheet that North Bruce Peninsula has used to do their asset on the corporate level, corporate side. So, as I mentioned, they don't have consultants. They basically do this. This is basically the committee who's doing this with, of course, strong collaboration with staff. So this is the spreadsheet I received. They were happy. I asked if I could share it. They said that's fine. What I simply did is took any kind of references with regards to particular location out of it, in case since this is a public document now. And it basically provides a bit of a tool that hopefully could be used by staff members to say, well, this is what a baseline looks like, or could look like. And I think John made a reference earlier on, like what are the conditions, for example, in order to meet the requirements of FCM. I'm not aware if this meets it, but I would imagine it does, because North Bruce Peninsula is part of PCP. So, and then they attached the next document that Brittany attached as well. They attached the other document from St. Catharines, which basically is and kind of, that's what they modeled their, they use it as a model to come up with the baseline that they completed and that's explained in here. So it's more, it's more kind of a reference, and to me, it kind of demystified it a little bit to think, okay, if we're talking about this, then all of a sudden it becomes very concrete. It's about kilowatt hours and liters of diesel and all that kind of stuff, and hopefully we can benefit from their experiences. And again, there's an open invitation that if there's any questions, it's in that spirit of collaboration, which is so wonderful. Any questions that staff may have, happy to connect you to the people who did this. We're all in it together. So it's a wonderful example of collaboration.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you very much. It is helpful to see the steps that the other municipalities have gone through who are just a little bit ahead of us for sure. Sue, did you have a question?
I do, and this may come across sounding a little facetious, and I don't intend it to be that way. But when I read that and it says fire hall and offices, and you include what that, I guess, sort of cost, energy cost and such would be, our fire hall doesn't sit within our municipality, it sits within Owen Sound. Do we have to include it?
I mean, my guess would be yes, because it is something that we own and operate, and so therefore we're responsible for the emissions as a result. But I don't know. I'm not an expert. I think that would be. I wonder if John, do you have a notion as to how that would work?
This is a really good question. And I think that you're right. We would eventually have to account for some of those emissions, but not all of those emissions. And there are different ways of doing this. I was looking at some of the information that Hiba had presented, and I'm trying to get her to agree with my calculations about how upper and lower tier municipalities cleave out in terms of our emissions. But this will be a work in progress. But yeah, we will be responsible for some of those.
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. Any other questions or comments regarding the energy audit and greenhouse gas inventory? Anne?
So my question is, again, I'm going back to timeline. It was approved by council several months ago now that this could be completed. And so when do we see this happening and getting it started? And is it something that staff can complete, committee could support if they wanted it, or is it something that we need to have an outside person do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. When I looked at those two examples, they look very, very different. And if we're going to do an audit and we're going to have a baseline, we want to make sure it's entirely accurate. And I also just, even by virtue of the names, the energy audit versus the greenhouse gas inventory, I'm not even 100% sure if those are the same thing or if one is just a subset of the other. So yeah, I think those are good questions, Anne. How do we want to move forward with that, and what is the right timing to do so? I wonder if Al has anything, any light to shed on that particular question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would suspect this is the type of dialogue we're going to have with the consultant when we bring a consultant on board. They will really help us define exactly what that's going to look like. In my experiences, they've done a lot of these in a lot of municipalities. We'll look for some of them that have made something that makes a lot of sense for us as part of our evaluation. But this is something that I think, and I'm going to be honest with you, we don't have the in-house expertise nor bandwidth to get it done. This is something that we're going to have to outsource for sure. And I see that as part of when we go out to get a consultant to come on board, it's part of defining what that scope is when we go out with an RFP. And these are the types of documents that we will use as part of our RFP scoping exercise so that we get someone on board and make it very clear what our expectations are and what those deliverables will be for us.
Okay, so that makes sense. So looking down the road a bit at that. particular item. Any other questions or comments about the energy audits and inventories? Okay, I'm seeing none, so moving on. So the next item is new business, and this is at my request. About a week ago, I had a phone call from a fellow councillor from a neighboring municipality in West Grey. West Grey declared a climate crisis. Oh, my Grey Bruce cat folks will probably know better than I, but I'm going to say close to 2 years ago, or a year and a half. Oh, good. That was a good guess on my part. And I think with COVID happening, there might have been a little drop in moving forward with that momentum. But I get the impression that that might be picking up again now. West Grey folks have been looking at our terms of reference and listening into some of our recorded meetings and curious about what direction we're taking and looking for partnerships with us. So it goes back to an earlier discussion about resource sharing and cost sharing. They have certainly reached out. I know that 2 of the councillors in particular, Beth Hamilton and Jeffrey Shea, who are both involved in the FCM Climate Action Leadership course, are looking for that type of partnership, and wondering if there's an opportunity for us to work together. I do believe they're reaching out to Grey Highlands as well, though I wonder if Grey Highlands is a little further down the road than the 2 of us as municipalities are. I could be wrong about that. So I think they're wondering if there's an opportunity to meet sooner, I think, rather than later when we talk about money and consultants and sharing in those costs. And I wonder, Al, if it's most appropriate for you to reach across to their CAO, who has also been involved, and that's Laura Johnston, and see if there is an opportunity to do a little bit of collaborating, whether it's on a smaller scale outside of this committee, where a couple of us might meet and then bring that information back to the committee, or otherwise. And I'm wondering how the rest of the committee feels about that. Sue?
I think it's a great idea to work together with them. I'm wondering when we schedule having the gentleman from here in Kinlaw speak to us, if we couldn't include West Grey's committee in that meeting so that they can take part in listening to everything that we are hearing at the same time.
Yeah, I think that would be a reasonable invitation. Other comments or suggestions, Anne?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, Sue, to do that, because that meeting is going to be happening prior to the Joint Council Climate Action Committee meeting. And I get a sense that if we were going to go into a joint venture, we would need to take that to council. So hearing that information and coming up with a recommendation prior to that joint meeting with council, I think makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's possible. If we could have it before council, I think that would be great. But even just if it's not going to happen that quickly, even just being able to advise council that other municipalities are reaching out and looking to form those partnerships, I think is a pretty convincing case for why we should be moving forward as well, and that we are looking for efficiencies. Other comments, questions? John?
Yeah, just very briefly, going back to my reviewing the Green Municipal Fund, one of the things that they fund over and over again are these partnerships. And when I looked at the existing case studies they had, they listed where multiple municipalities will come together with a proposal and a plan. And you can get funding for planning, and then you can get funding for implementing. One was integrated energy reduction issues. A second was waste management issues, and the third was GHG reduction. So those are 3 areas that have been funded by the FCM in the past for these collaborations between municipal councils.
That's good to know. That ties in the collaboration piece with the ability to access more funding part as well. Thank you. Anne?
Yeah, just one question in terms of that's kind of a funding opportunity for collaboration, but also just the function or the functionality of working. I don't know, my geography is not the best, and I'm not sure how close West Grey is to us. And is that an issue that we're not kind of side by side on the map?
It's a good question. We're not side by side, but I suspect geographically and demographically, I don't think we're too dissimilar. I did look that information up, and now I can't seem to put my fingers on it. Sue?
West Grey is the other side of the Township of Chatsworth, so Township of Chatsworth is between us. But I would agree that they are very similar to us. Maybe we should reach out to Township of Chatsworth and see if they're getting started on things and see if they wanted to take part as well.
And John?
Yeah, just further to that, my experience in the Niagara Peninsula was that as momentum and interest grew, there was a partnership formed with Brock, and then they sent out, these municipalities that were spearheading this, sent out an invitation to all the municipalities on the Niagara Peninsula to participate in the climate action program. 7 municipalities agreed, and they went together and formed this collaboration. Once they got going, the others wanted in, but it was too late then. So maybe the way we want to approach this is, as we gain momentum, as a leadership municipality, perhaps we send out an invite, and then we build these partnerships, and then from there we go forward.
Great, yeah, great idea. Great comment. Anne?
Just a quick comment. Can we go cross county lines on that?
I don't see why not. I mean, do you mean into like Bruce County or, yeah? Sue?
We're actually inviting someone from Huron-Kinloss in Bruce County to come this way. So I had already kind of wondered about that, getting Aaron Eldersley and Township of South Bruce Peninsula involved, because they border us on the west side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that makes sense. The more the merrier. Anne?
Well, I'm going to direct this question to Al. If I was kind of the leader of this fleet, it's becoming a fleet, not a ship, does that make him at all anxious about it getting bigger and bigger in terms of the numbers of partners?
Through you, Madam Chair, no, it doesn't make me nervous at all. In fact, I think it's a great opportunity for us to take and demonstrate our leadership in this area. So I was just waiting for everyone to have some comments, but I will certainly commit to, we have bi-weekly meetings now as lower tier CAOs with the county. We all meet bi-weekly and talk about various issues, but we also have some email groups and different things. So I will send out an email, and I will specifically reach out to Laura in West Grey, but I'll reach out to all the CAOs and see whether there's a desire for us to sort of have a dedicated session to further explore this, and see whether there's some interest in everyone sort of jumping on board with our initiative. And at the very least, I can provide an update to this group and also to our council when we have our joint meeting, so that they're aware of the dialogue that's happened to date, and sort of the various levels of interest in terms of partnering and working together. So I will certainly provide an update for everyone here.
Thank you, Al. That sounds great. And I will loop back to Beth Hamilton with West Grey and just let her know of our decision to have our CAO connect with theirs to get that ball rolling. And
So just, Al, when you're doing that reach out, will that be to both Bruce and Grey?
Right now, I'm going to say no, but there's no reason why we can't sort of expand that. I will ask. I would suspect it would probably be the CAO of the county, probably reaching out to the CAO of the other county and sort of handling it from there. But I would suspect if we could right now just start with our county and our lower tier municipalities all sort of gathering some momentum and some strength, and then we can explore potentially expanding that. I'm fearful that if we start to sort of diversify and go all over the place, that we might lose a little bit of traction, and we're kind of, I don't want to make, I don't know how I say this. I don't want to make any enemies of any municipalities either. I think our strength will be in sort of going forward with this all together versus alienating or sort of highlighting that some municipalities are sort of dragging themselves out on this. So I'd rather get everyone on the bus willingly versus shaming them and forcing them to get on the bus unwillingly. So that would be my approach.
Absolutely. Sue, you're next.
Thank you. I agree with Al. I know the two counties have worked together when community well-being and safety plan had to come into play, but that started right from the very beginning of that process, and everybody worked together and worked very well together so that each of us didn't have our own individual plan. But in this case, we all seem to be at slightly different areas, so it might be best to stay within Grey County on this one. Although I had, as I say, I had already thought of that. Aaron Eldersley in town of South Bruce Peninsula, just west of it. So you never know. Maybe we will join them.
Yeah, and I mean, if it makes for partnerships with people at a similar stage of the game as we are in sharing the cost of, for example, consulting work, then I would hope that we wouldn't turn that opportunity away for sure. Yeah. Any other comments about this particular item? Anne, I see your hand is up, but that might have been from previous. Okay, thank you. Brittany and Al, do you need any further, more formal direction from the committee in terms of follow-up on those items, or has that been determined and we're good to move on?
I would suggest the direction has been clear, so please.
Thank you. Perfect. Then moving on, any notice of motion that anyone cares to bring forward? I see none. I am assuming there's no items for closed session. And then the date of our next regular meeting, has that sort of been tentatively decided upon, Brittany, or are we doing that on the fly here?
So we're doing it on the fly. But I have been looking at the calendar and have a couple of suggestions. So we've all discussed scheduling a meeting to host the discussion with Huron-Kinloss and kind of get everything ready for the special council meeting. So, and given our kind of tight deadlines, I would like to propose, and Al, please shake your head at me if this does not work with your schedule. Our CAO is incredibly busy. So first stab, I would like to suggest the afternoon of March 12th for our next meeting of this committee. That gives Huron-Kinloss plenty of time to be available on that date, hopefully. So I would like to suggest that we tentatively schedule March 12th, pending confirmation from Huron-Kinloss. And I have the thumbs up from our CAO, so that's great. So we'll go with the afternoon of March 12th for our next meeting.
Is that then, 1 p.m.? You're thinking 1 p.m. then, Brittany?
Correct. Yes, that would have to be in the afternoon at 1 o'clock again. So that's the next meeting of this committee. Then
just, I think, Sue, do you have a comment before we move on, or our conflict with that date?
I do. We have biodigester that day at 11. So are we thinking it would be over by 1 to be able to go right on into that, or should we maybe try for 2?
Sorry,
you go ahead, Brittany.
my intention is that that meeting will not go any longer than 2 hours. Okay. So we should be fine to make the 1 o'clock.
Okay, good. Okay. Thank you.
Is 1:30 more reasonable? Do you need a half an hour break in between, or?
No, I'm just going to be sitting here. I'll be fine. Lunch will get delivered to me at some point.
All right. So March the 12th at 1 p.m. for the next sort of regular meeting. And carry on, Brittany, please.
Thank you. So just while we're on this topic, I wanted to throw out a couple of tentative dates just to see kind of where we're at with the special council meeting. So council normally meets on Wednesday evenings at 5 o'clock. The 24th, we do not have a regularly scheduled meeting. So it would be my proposal that we schedule that special council meeting for March 24th at 5 o'clock, just given that fits in with council's regular schedule. That also gives council time to consider the requests of the committee prior to March 30th budgetary discussions. So while that is tentative, that is what I'm thinking right now. I will confirm so with the committee once we have everything confirmed on our end. And I did see a thumbs up from our CAO, so we're good.
So that, sorry, I had my eye on my calendar. Is everyone sort of nodding their approval for the 24th at 5 pending council approval? That'll be 3 meetings in a row for me that day. So I'll be the one who's looking for food to be thrown into my mouth in between meetings. All right. And is that it then, Brittany, for scheduling? Or okay, perfect. And that date will be contingent upon council's approval and their ability to attend, and will be confirmed at a later date. Okay, that brings us to a close. Do I have a motion to adjourn? And all in favor? Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you to staff, and thank you to Mr. Dahlmeyer, who has signed off previously. And our meeting is adjourned, so we'll see you next time.
Okay, thanks
Take
a
care,
lot.
everyone. Have a good weekend.
And